This is Wild Nevadacast. I'm Dave Santina, coming to you from the studios of PBS Reno in Reno, Nevada. And today I got David Rodriguez with me, who is a travel and blogger, travel writer, blogger, just starting a brand new weekly column at the Reno News and Review called The Dish.
The Dish, correct.
Very excited about that. Congratulations. That's cool.
Thank you.
I just learned about that today because you're just starting it.
Yes.
It's brand new. And so I didn't even know about that, but that's I got to make sure to mention it because that's going to be your title now that you've got an official column.
Yeah.
So
David from The Dish.
David from The Dish,
Yes.
yeah. But we met at a holiday party. In fact, two holiday parties a year apart. So 2023, we met at the News and Review holiday party.
Correct.
And then again a month or two ago. And every time we talk, we get into these Wild Nevada conversations, and I realize, okay, we got to talk about this stuff. We got to have you on as a podcast guest because you are the kind of person who we kind of hoped would see that show and go out and explore. And you're that guy, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, I credit you for so much of my desire to get out and see some of the things that you showed the audience firsthand and maybe take away my own experience. I've always tried to kind of capture a few thoughts about a place or a meal or someone that you meet. And my blogging really started as a result of my desire to kind of go out there and do that stuff for myself.
Yeah. So, as we're talking, I'm realizing you're telling me stories about your travels and your back roads trips. And I'm thinking, this is probably the person who should be hosting this show instead of me.
I don't think so.
It was just fun because I've always enjoyed hearing everybody else's stories. And one of the things about that Wild Nevada series that always was fun was getting recommendations from other people who've been to places that we never had been and say, here's what you got to do. You got to go here. You got to go here. You got to try this restaurant. You got to do this. And some of it we actually could incorporate and some of it we couldn't. But hearing your stories were really inspirational, and I got energy from you just hearing about how excited you are because you have the real passion for it.
Thank you.
So how did that develop? Where'd that come from?
Yeah, I think for the most part, I started with a pretty keen interest in food. And my official career is in dentistry, and a lot of it is in sales and marketing, so hence a lot of entertainment. And you get a chance to go places, Europe in particular, and try things that maybe are out of reach if you're just sort of local here. And I thought, well, how do I bring some of that experience to my friends and family? So I started writing a blog about that. And I try to, I hear that I write in humorous fashion, but I'm just writing what's in my head and trying to capture that as accurately as possible. And it brought me to the attention of Chris over at News and Review, who liked one of my stories about a really famous chef in Italy, Massimo Bottura, and a really crazy day trying to get some time with him. And so as I thought a little bit more about what was important to me, it was really trying to be out and find more stories. And your series really inspired me to see some parts of Nevada that I hadn't seen. So I literally just started to get in the rig and drive. And I think we've talked about how much of Nevada is dirt roads. So you learn very quickly to be prepared and to really expect the unexpected. And that has been so much fun.
Yeah. So when you decide to go out, how do you approach a road trip? Do you know where you're going to go? Do you just let it take you wherever it takes you?
A little bit of both. I think the road less traveled, if we want to go there, is always the most interesting. But oftentimes I'll have an idea. I did a piece recently that was published in Nevada Magazine about the travel markers, the historical markers you see around the state. And a lot of people, some of them, what caught my eye, Dave, was that a lot of them seem to be in disrepair. It had been a while since they've been sort of kept up, or it's tough to read what's on there because over the years it's just faded.
Right.
And I got motivated enough about that to contact the State Department and found the people that are in charge of that. And they're like, yeah, no one's really keeping an eye on that. And I said, well, I'd love to sort of give you an idea of where, what kind of condition they're in. So I started cataloging them, and I've been to almost every one.
Wow.
I'm about 20 short of the 217, but it created an idea. Okay, why are they here? What stories are they telling? And, what can I do to kind of bring that to life a little bit? And that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I like that story. Again, that's in Nevada Magazine. Is that the most recent issue?
It is, actually, yes.
Okay, so I read that story, and I enjoyed it because, for one, I always enjoy hearing the stories of other people's travels.
Right.
But also, it reminded me of some trips that I had been on, some of the places, and you had some within your story are, if you look at this online, or I suppose it's probably the same if you have the physical magazine, there are some pro tips that are mentioned in there
Yes.
that are specific to these different regions that you're writing about. So you go to certain places, you talk about the markers in those regions, and then within that, there's a little pro tip column, and I circled a couple of things because I remember places, and I thought, oh, that's really good that you're highlighting some of them.
Yeah.
One in the Pioche area was one of the areas you wrote about, and you talked about in the pro tip, hit the cemetery, hit the Thompson's Opera House, which we actually did a segment on for a while, Nevada, and was really fascinating.
Pretty
so I
cool.
love that you're highlighting these places, and also you mentioned the restaurant there, the Silver Cafe, which, if I recall, at least when we were there, was pretty much the only full-service restaurant in town.
Yeah, it seems like it might still be the case there, but the history, the nostalgia of those places really appealed to me, and it just scratched the surface, and stories just start coming at you, and that's what I really appreciate, kind of taking the lid off of some smaller towns like that. So part of that pro tip is really to get people to spend some time. And I think that's where the good stuff is.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the story, for tips for me, but also to remind me of places that I've been and enjoyed. And some of this stuff is also, they're like some hidden gems. Like there are places that not everybody's aware of. You've probably been to a number of places that you could recommend to me that I didn't know existed.
Sure.
So are there recommended road trips? Like if you were to introduce somebody who's new to Nevada, and quite a few people are, people are moving in here all the time.
Right.
What would you say is a good starter road trip to say, all right, let me give you a taste of the state?
Yeah, sure. I think one of the sections in that article is sort of in and around Fallon. So if we're thinking about starting from Reno, it's not too much adventure. You can certainly get there and back in a long day, or you could overnight, which I'd highly recommend. There's some just terrific stuff there. But if you get out on that 50, I like to say that I've eaten a lot of bad cheeseburgers or bad meals, so anyone that reads my stuff doesn't have to. So I tend to get anything back to food. So I'm always thinking about, okay, where is lunch on this trip, and or where is dinner? But if you really think about that Fallon, Fernley area as a place to get started, really cool. You got Grimes Point, and you have the petroglyphs out there. You have Sand Mountain, which is one of only a handful in the world of what they call singing sand dunes. And it's really the notion that as the wind hits it, it makes certain noises, and it's obviously a pretty spiritual place to the Native American population, and I think it needs to be respected. But if you, a great example of that would be if you're going to see Sand Mountain, right in front of it, right off 50, is one of the most distinct remnants of the Pony Express stations. And, sort of putting Sand Mountain aside for a second, I spent half a day just kind of walking that Pony Express station thinking, wow, this might have been a pretty tough way to make a living if you're managing that, just based on the quality of the water, when you could find it, and those types of things. So that's a great example if you combine that with maybe lunch at Slanted Porch, or, Frey Ranch. If it's a Saturday, go in there and get a taste. But I think that if you really think about that area, it's really not more than an hour and a half from where we're sitting today. Gives someone a taste of more rural, at Nevada, and the adventures that you can have pretty close to home.
Yeah, and I got to second you on the Slanted Porch. We've been there a number of times over the years on trips on the way out or on the way back from a Wild Nevada production, and I got to say it is kind of a little extra fun when somebody says, "Hey, I saw you guys. I know what you're doing," and the owners are viewers. They watched the Wild Nevada series and said, "Hey, we like your show," and I was like, "Oh, great!" And so then they bring us amazing food, and so it really makes it more fun to say, "Hey, look, if you're going through Fallon and you need some lunch or dinner, Slanted Porch, that's a really excellent place." And they have their own ranch, right? So they're serving meat from their own ranch.
Yeah, their lamb is incredible. That lamb burger, I'd walk there right now. But if you think about those stories, another one just 3 blocks over is the social club, the speakeasy at the Cranberry Cottage, and getting to know that family and their commitment. They are 5th and 6th generation Nevadans. And they had always had their eye on that bank building they're in presently, and just couldn't make it work. Finally, made it work, and the labor of love that speakeasy is incredible. I think it's one of the coolest spots.
I marked that as something I wanted to talk about because I'd never heard of it before. So for those of us like me who don't know of this speakeasy, it's kind of a hidden, sort of a best kept secret, right?
Yeah, it really is. The Cranberry Cottage is a vintage store that's been in that area for a long, long while. Her name is Pam, and Brett is her husband. Yost, I think, is their last name, and they have been supporters and business owners in the community for a while. But apparently, each Friday, people would just sort of randomly show up at her vintage store with bottles of wine or a little bit of whiskey, and they just basically have a party on her patio. It became so attractive and such a part of the community that she decided to kind of formalize that in this new spot and create a place for it. So it's behind the typical speakeasy. It's behind a bookshelf that if you truly didn't know about it, you wouldn't see it. But if you go in, it's one of the most remarkable places in the state. And I include Las Vegas when I say that, primarily because it is built with their own hands and local artifacts, old 100-year-old doors from ranches that have disappeared and things, and it's as Nevada as it gets, and I'm thrilled to share it with people.
That's really cool. Now I want to go and try it and go check it out. And is it any day of the week, or is it?
Yes, I believe it is open 7 days now. They have some live music on the weekends in the summertime. They've taken over the rooftop bar, so you kind of take your drinks and things up there. But it's just really remarkable, and I think Edible was a great place to sort of show that, because the photography in that book is so beautiful. It really gives people an idea of what they're up for.
Yeah, you're talking about Edible Reno-Tahoe.
Yes,
the magazine. I'm very familiar with it. I have to confess. That's how I know you, partly because my wife is the managing editor for Edible, but also writes for the Reno News and Review, which is where I met you at the Reno News and Review holiday party.
Yes.
So because of her, we're here talking today.
Yes, and thank you to Jessica for that.
Yeah. So Edible, beautiful magazine. So if you're listening to this or if you're watching on YouTube, go to ediblerenotahoe.com, I believe.
Yes, I think so.
And you can see the online version, or better yet, just pick up a copy. It's free and it's all over town in a lot of restaurants, a lot of businesses. Beautifully produced, if I do say so myself. I'm a little biased, but this article is in there and with a beautiful spread, and then the story of this speakeasy, which was news to me. I love when I get to hear about a place like this. People make assumptions that I know everything because of the show Wild Nevada. I only know what I did on the show.
Right.
I'm not out there traveling on my own. It's not what I'm doing. Right. I'm home on the weekends with my family most of the time. And now we're doing, when we do a show, I got to go out and explore. But now I'm sitting in a studio, so I'm really not getting that experience. So you're bringing things to me that are teaching me, and now I've got a reason to go back to that area, which to be fair, Slanted Porch is a good enough reason for me.
Yes.
The Sand Mountain was the very first show we ever did.
I wasn't aware of that.
First day of Wild Nevada in the year 2000. Wow. Back in the day, was the first thing we did. We were at Grimes Point to start the show. Hey, welcome to this show. We didn't know what we were doing. We're doing a pilot show. We go to Sand Mountain, and we're at. We get out, and we have one person that we're going to meet, a ranger or a BLM representative, I think, is going to tell us about the area, the geography, the history, the science of how a pile of sand gets here in the middle of the desert. But that's the only thing we had scheduled. Meanwhile, as we get there, we see the dune buggies, and our producer, the creator of Wild Nevada, Jack Kelly, says, hey, maybe we can get a ride on one of those dune buggies. And so he sends Chris Orr to go talk to somebody and see if she can get a lift. And a guy says, sure, I'll give you a ride. And they get all wrapped up and goggled up, and off they go, over the top of the dune. And then we watch them become, smaller and smaller and smaller in our sight, and then disappear over the top of the dune, and silence. And now we're looking at each other going, we don't even know that guy's name.
Yeah, no kidding.
They may never come back. This was a bad idea. But
Right.
they did come back. It was all good. But
Right.
that was the first day when I realized, we're just kind of winging it here. We don't know what we're doing. But that was fun. And so I got a kick out of Sand Mountain and getting to learn about it. And so every time I drive by that, I think about that day.
Sure.
And then further down 50 is something I wanted to ask you about.
Sure.
One of my favorite things to do is when I think about reminiscing about those trips is where is the best food we had,
Yes.
and where were our favorite food locations. And I know that that's an inspiration for you
It is.
to write about this stuff.
It
If you do you have favorite locations, favorite food destinations in Nevada that you recommend to people?
Yes, and I always start with the Star in Elko. I think that's sort of the solid gold version of Nevada at its best. I've done some work in the books, News and Review, I think, or was the place that was on Basque restaurants in Nevada and what they represent, not only to that community, but the community around them, which I think is such a great story. And when I stumbled upon the Star, it was one of my first trips out there. And Dave, I knew it was a little bit different the moment I walked in, just primarily because of how everyone was dressed, very ranch style, cowboy hat, dusters, all that kind of thing. And here I am, head to toe in Patagonia. And as I found a little space at the bar, and as I kind of wedged my way in for a Coors, gentleman in black duster looked sort of ominous, a little bit. Black hat, black duster, kind of looks over his shoulder, says, "You're not from around here, are you?" And I thought, oh my goodness gracious, have I walked into something I shouldn't have? But turned out to be named Steven, and one of the nicest guys you're ever going to meet. And I told him, and I think this is funny, I said, no, I'm just sort of exploring and checking it out. He said, "Where are you from?" And I said, "Well, I'm from Reno." And he said, "Oh, the big city."
Yeah.
And I
you're
laughed.
laughing.
Being born and raised in Los Angeles, that struck me as a little bit funny. But asked him what I was doing. I said, primarily looking for hot springs and just looking to write a little bit of a travel article. And he said, "Oh, well, I know a couple hot springs." And immediately, I mean, his wife, his two children, his uncle who's 3 seats down. And I got this great feeling about what sort of atmosphere, what sort of family community energy exists at the Star. And then you add what I think is, certainly the world's best French fries, but a lot of other things they do are just terrific. In fact, I might have to drive there after this to get some.
You are making my mouth water just
Yes.
reminding me of it. I had the 2 biggest steaks I ever had in my life were both at the Star
Yes.
and were many years apart, but the second time I got to do it was this last summer.
Okay.
Because of Wild Nevada, I've been able to learn a number of locations that I would never have known about.
Sure.
I know they're very popular with a lot of people, but for
Sure.
me, it was just not on my radar.
Sure.
Lamoille Canyon and Lamoille Lake and the Liberty
Gosh,
Pass
gorgeous.
area, incredible. And so I took my family there for a mini vacation. I think it was fall break, and we climbed up to Liberty Lake, and I had promised them, this is going to be a long day and you'll do a lot of walking, but it's beautiful, worth it. And then at the end, we're going to the Star because we're going to eat like kings. And
Kings.
oh, it's so good. And I again, I was like, I remember having this giant steak years ago. I'm going to get another steak. And I think it was the same one. I don't know how they cloned it somehow. And it was the exact
Yes.
same one.
Yeah.
Huge, right? And I thought, I know when it arrives, I'm going to say there's no way I can eat all of that, and I'm still going to eat all of that,
Of
and that's
course.
exactly what happened.
Of course.
It's incredible. So yeah, I am right with you with the Star,
Yeah,
and that's
that
right
fried
there.
garlic is amazing, and no matter when you go, it's consistent. It's always warm and friendly, and the stories in that place just write themselves, including the bar itself, which is original, and the trough underneath. And usually Scott's mother, the owner, is named Scott, and
Yeah.
his mom is named Mary, and she's at the bar having a Kalamoto right at 10 in the morning, and it's just fantastic. But I think in that area, Ode comes to mind. That Mediterranean place. I was speaking with Tim
Oh, yeah.
about that earlier. Just fantastic hummus, and you think, gosh, where am I? Am I in Israel? It's really terrific.
Right.
But there's some spots there. If you want to go out 50, I love to always stop at Cold Spring and get a cheeseburger there. I think that's very underrated.
At Cold Spring.
Yes, Cold Spring. You kind of pull over. It's 2 or 3 buildings and walk in. It's sort of half Western Museum / convenience store and a bar that basically only serves Coors and cheeseburgers.
Oh, funny.
And cheeseburgers absolutely worth the stop. So
I'm gonna have to do that because I'm Middlegate's has been my go-to, and I've
Great
always
spot.
loved Middlegate burgers.
Yep.
And I was gonna ask
Yeah,
you
with
if
the
you
knife
had
in it.
if you had a favorite burger or a couple, any favorite burger locations? Because you said you eat the bad ones so you could write about them and people would avoid them, and you can tell them what the good ones are.
Yeah, and very subjective, obviously, and people often ask because I write about food as if this is coming from a burning bush someplace. No, it's my opinion about something. But I remember being disappointed as well. You don't always strike gold, and there was an article somewhere about a cheeseburger in Lundy, and if you know that area, it's a big waterfowl, resting place and a preserve, and you can look at all the birds and things, which isn't my thing, but I know a lot of people really like it.
Right.
But there are some hot springs and warm pools in there that are fantastic, and you really have to find one. In fact, it's the very first one I ever found exploring, and I thought, okay, like yourself, I'm going to reward myself with the best cheeseburger in the state of Nevada. And as soon as I walked in, I thought, yeah, I don't know. And when you hear the microwave going, you think, oh, okay, maybe not. Now, to their credit, it was 6 p.m. on a Thursday or something, so probably not the busiest evening, but that's one I'd like to forget. So if you really think about it, I love the burger at Rack's out in Ely. That's a great spot. The places we mentioned in Elko. I think in a place that Nevadans might know, but if anyone's listening that doesn't, a bite in Winnemucca at the Martin, that is really, really tough to beat.
Yeah.
There's some great spots, some new ones in Winnemucca. In fact, I'm going to head out there in a couple of weeks and see if I can't uncover them, because while the Reno News and Review and Edible tend to focus on, I would say, Reno and Tahoe.
Sure.
Some of the other books I've contributed to are more statewide, and I really like that because there's just less to read about, so more to contribute, so to speak.
Nice. Well, you mentioned the Martin. That's one of the Basque restaurants that you listed in the story that you wrote for the News and Review.
Yes.
It was the Martin. It was JT.
I love JT.
JT Basque in Gardnerville.
Yeah.
I have to admit, as many times as I've been past, the timing never worked. I still never been, so I have to go there.
Yeah, it's definitely worth a stop. And in fact, it's much closer than Elko, which is great. And there's just, what struck me about that place as really a travel and food writer is the hats. And if you go into the bar there, for any of our listeners that haven't been there, you'll see hats with a name on the wall. And these are local ranchers, local citizens, community members that have passed on that are being remembered in such a warm, I think, and sincere way that the hat of Broda, for example, that person meant a lot to JT and the people there, and they're remembered as such. And I just think uniquely Nevadan and really cool.
Yeah, I love that. And I remember a comment you had written in that article about the owner. You had asked about the hats, and she said something to the effect that it's the spirit of this place, that they are the spirit of this place, and they need to be here.
Yeah, and that family's really considered themselves to be just the stewards of that, and I think that's a cool approach. I think Scott at the Star is kind of the same way, but you can look outside of the Basque houses and find a lot of that in Reno if you are really willing to get off the path, and I think you and I both agree that sometimes the most interesting part of a trip is as soon as you get the tires off the pavement.
It's true. The things you don't anticipate turn out to be the most memorable.
Right.
Sometimes they're not the best, but they might be the most memorable.
Yeah, I've got some sagebrush stripes on my rig as a result of that. And sometimes you get to a place that you really have built up in your mind, and you get there and the spring is dry, or it isn't as you imagined it. And that's okay too, because that's part of what we're out there to discover and share with other people. And you don't always get what you expected. And sometimes that's better than you expected, and sometimes it's disappointing, but you went through it anyway, and it was a cool learning experience.
For sure. I remember mentioning at the holiday party that you had mentioned your racing stripes on your vehicle, and I remembered that one of the episodes of Wild Nevada back in the early 2000s, when the first few years of that show, the creator of the show, the producer Jack Kelly, had a brand new vehicle, and he took it out on an episode, and we were doing mining ghost towns outside of Eureka, and I remember we were driving along on a ridge where you really don't have any room to move. You're just following along the cutout on the down the hill. You're just you're on the only flat part, so you don't have there's nowhere to go around an object. You just kind of have to go through it. And we were driving under and through some big heavy shrubberies that were making a lot of squealing noises on the sides of his car, and I thought, this is a brand new car. And he was fine with it. He's like, it's going to happen. It's what do you expect? It's, it's going to happen out here. And I just remember thinking, why did it have to happen so soon after you bought this car?
Right.
I think the
weekend.
most bothered by it because it just troubled me. But that's the Nevada racing stripes that you hear about. So yeah, it's tough. I wanted to highlight one other something that surprised me. Places that surprised me when you talk about food.
Sure.
One was Jarbidge.
Yes.
There's no reason they should have food that good.
I completely agree with you because it's literally in the middle of nowhere.
And I remember we had multiple people there, but two of our guys, or two camera guys, were each starving. One, I ordered, I think, a triple burger.
Oh, wow.
And the other ordered a double, and they might have both ordered a triple, but they put them away, like completely put them away, and maybe regretted it a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
I had a regular cheeseburger,
Yes.
and I thought it was incredible.
Yeah.
So to me, it was my memories of those two places. I say Middlegate, which I always loved, and Jarbidge, places that are out of the way that they could get away with mediocre food.
Oh, totally. Just that they have food would be great, right?
But it was legitimately good. And another place that I think that about is Great Basin National Park, that area, right? You've got the park itself. They have a cafe up by the cave, by Lehman Cave.
Correct.
Which I thought had really good food. They have a chef, like a legit chef.
Agreed.
And then there's Sugar, Salt, and Malt, the restaurant in Baker, the little town down the street with the twin sisters who own and operate it. And we did a story with them for an episode of Wild Nevada.
Spot.
And that was great food.
Yep.
And then they were at the time about to open up a brewery or a distillery. I can't remember. I think it was a distillery, maybe a brewery. No, brewery, because that's the malt.
Correct.
The malt represented their upcoming brewery.
Correct.
And I have not been back since. I'd like to go and see how that's happening.
Yes.
They had 2 food trucks in Baker.
Yes.
Didn't know that existed.
Yes, the Mexican one is legit. It's fantastic.
I mean, we're talking about the tiniest town, and
oh my gosh,
3, 4 great options. And not to mention, down at the border is the Border Inn, which, as we were shooting our episode relatively recently, it's been a couple years, we met the owner who had just purchased and was beginning to renovate and make changes, and their food was pretty decent even then. I suspect it might have even improved. So for a place that's as out of the way as Great Basin National Park and that area, 4 or 5 legitimately good food options.
Yeah, it's really terrific, and it's nice to kind of pull the two things together. I went out to see it. I like a uniquely Nevadan experience, right? You're down the Lehman Caves, and it's the second highest peak in Nevada, so you can sort of go, from the basement to the penthouse all in one trip, and then you combine that with a great stop burger and a beer there, and they're lovely ladies. You're absolutely right. And each time I go through that, I think, how do I share this with people? And the articles sort of stem from that. I had an experience in Austin not too long ago that has to be its own article. And Austin, not known for food, but such a uniquely Nevadan town. You got the castle, you got some folks that have been there 100 years, literally. And I think I met one of the ones that's been there 100 years. And so it just motivates me, and maybe you as well, to keep going out and keep exploring. And like I said, sometimes the stories just write themselves.
For sure. And I never would have gone out on my own before having produced and been a part of Wild Nevada. Now, having done it, I'm much more open and interested in going out and traveling and just seeing what I find. And that's something I never would have thought of myself. So I appreciate Wild Nevada for sparking that in me. And that's something I look forward to. And I look forward to reading your column, The Dish, starting this week in the News and Review. And is it going to be every week?
It's actually monthly.
Okay.
Yes, but I before we got away from that, I want to thank you and Wild Nevada for sparking that interest in me. And as a result of that, I think my stories and talking to me have sparked an interest as well. And so, that circle, that it continues to grow. So I want to thank you for that. Truly an inspiration. Well, you and Tad Dunbar.
Yes. Well,
yes. But
the first time I've ever been in the same sentence with Tad Dunbar, longtime news anchor here, for those of you who don't know. Tad's was an institution. Yeah.
Yes, and got out and got in the Jeep and told some great stories. So, The Dish is something that I talked to Chris, editor at the News and Review.
That's
about.
Chris Wagner?
Yes, correct. And just a great lady, and has been pretty instrumental in helping me grow as a writer. But I'm always trying to pitch something about food to her. And I said, it's not always just the chef that has the story to tell. Sometimes it's someone in food service, like around the corner at UNR. It's someone at a food bank. It's a lot of different perspectives on how food can really be a center of gravity for a community. And so the dish is really a series of questions, the same 7, 8, 9 questions that I'll ask each of these individuals. I have 3 in the can so far. And really, it's interesting to me to see how they answer differently and how they might answer in a similar way. And one of the questions is just for fun, what's the strangest thing you have in your fridge, right? Or, what's your earliest food memory? And that's really a neat chance to figure out what brought them to where they are, or what at least sparked that interest. And it's a cool way to, I think, uncover some stories.
I love it. And just hearing you ask that question, hypothetically, and now I'm wondering, what was my earliest food memory? And I'm going to have to think about that for a while.
Yes.
You've sparked a thought in me today. Well
That's
done.
great.
Thank you, David.
Yes.
It's David Rodriguez at The Dish at the Reno News and Review. Read it every month. And then look for his stories in Edible, and then on many other publications as well.
Instagram, where Reno eats, those types of things. So I'm sure, sometimes the story is more appropriate for one place than another, but love to continue to write about what's happening and meet interesting people. I think Nevada is one of the most interesting states in the country, and I've been to all but 2 of them, and I'll continue to see if I can uncover some of that and share it.
Nice. Well, come back after some more travels and tell me about new places.
I will, for sure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. All right. Before we go, I want to remind everybody, watch Wild Nevada on PBS Reno. That's via broadcast or through streaming at pbsreno.org and many other streaming sources these days. Also, you can watch segments on PBS Reno's YouTube channel. Also, if you have a question about Wild Nevada, or maybe a comment or a suggestion, I ask you to send them to me at podcasts@pbsreno.org. My thanks to David Rodriguez, and thank you for listening to Wild Nevadacast.